Where are the Oklahoma Sooners at their best?
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase over at Game Time. I'm John Williams. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at Sooners Wire. Jay is still out of town celebrating his wife's birthday, so happy birthday to the lovely Mrs. Smith. And the Oklahoma Sooners have a lot going on this offseason and a lot of questions to be answered. We're going to discuss what CBS Sports had to say about Brent Venables taking over the play calling duties on defense. Also, who's got a shot to be a 2025 All-American. ESPN snubbed a few dudes. We'll discuss that coming up in the second segment. But we're going to start it off with what the Oklahomans' Colton Sully had to say about who is the best position group on the team. Now, let's count it down from 10 to 1 because I think this is a fun way to do it. Coming in at number 10, you guessed it, the tight end group. He projects that Devon Mitchell will be the starter at tight end, but you go into a offseason after what you saw in 2024, and it's hard to have a lot of expectation or high hopes for the tight end position. It's a group that has kind of been average over the last 2 years, and Bauer Sharp did some good things for you. He just got overextended and overused, and the responsibilities on him to pass the football or run the football were just a little excessive. But given an offense in which maybe he should have been the fourth or fifth option in the passing game, perhaps tight end looks a whole lot better. But from a blocking perspective, over the last 2 years, it just hasn't been great. So hopefully that's a position that when we are looking back on the 2025 season a year from now, we're thinking, oh man, tight end, it was not Oklahoma's worst position group. It was actually one of their better ones. So hopefully they make a big jump. Coming in at number 9, the special teams unit. You're relying on a couple transfers at punter and kicker coming from Kennesaw State, potentially. Now there's a Liam Evans, who was a former Coles 5-star kicking prospect that came to Oklahoma that's going to be competing for that job. And we'll see if Oklahoma's special teams units, especially the kicking game, can be as good as it was this year, but you get a little bit more out of the return game, I'll feel better about the direction there. We just got to get something out of the return game. You've just had a non-existent return game for too long at this point at Oklahoma. Coming in at number 8, and maybe a little bit surprising. I'm not sure if you're going to be surprised by this or not, but it's wide receiver. Wide receiver comes in at number 8, and Colton Sully over at the Oklahoma is projecting that Deion Burks, Jayden Gibson, and Giovanni Gibson will be the starters for Oklahoma. Now, I'm a little bit skeptical as to whether or not Jayden Gibson will be ready for the regular season, but if he is ready for the regular season, the ceiling for him is as high as anybody we've seen since maybe CeeDee Lamb at Oklahoma. And I only say since CeeDee Lamb because CeeDee Lamb is one of the best wide receivers of the last decade, collegiately, at the professional level, whatever you want to say. So I'm not going to put those expectations on my guy, Jayden Gibson, but if he's healthy, he's going to be a big time contributor for you. We saw what he's capable of in 2023, and that was just in a rotational role where he was maybe your fourth wide receiver. You get him on the field for 50, 60 snaps in a game, and you throw to him 6-7 times a game, and I think he's got a chance to be a big time playmaker for you. Coming in at number 7, just ahead of wide receiver, and this might be conflicting for some of you. You might actually have wide receiver above cornerback, which comes in at number 7. And I totally think that would be fair, because even though you may have question marks at wide receiver, I think you like the numbers that you have there, and you like the guys that are at the position and giving you an opportunity to at least have some competitive depth at the position. At cornerback, you're really, really young. You're really, really inexperienced, and you don't have a strong veteran option for you. Gentry Williams, you're hoping will come back off of injury and be the guy that you saw play really good ball against Texas, play really good ball in that 2023 season before getting hurt. But outside of that, man, cornerback's got to show something. It's a position that's got a lot to prove in 2025. And I talked about it with Jaron Spore on yesterday's show. Eli Bowen, he's a good player. You've got Jacoby Johnson, a good player, but you need those guys to take steps, and you need Gentry Williams to get healthy. Coming in at number 6, And again, you might feel like this might be a little bit too high, but again, there's some strength in numbers here for the offensive line group at number 6 for Colton Sully. You don't really know what you're going to get out of that group. I think everybody thought that it would come together and it would work itself out, but it never really did. Colton Sully's projecting your starters to be Logan Howland and Derek Simmons at tackle, Fabeche Wiwu and Jacob Sexton at guard, and Troy Everett at center. I've seen similar projections in a lot of different places, and I think that'd be okay, but I need to know that Jacob Sexton's going to stay healthy for a full season before I'm ready to rely upon him for a full season to be a starter for me. I need availability. I need continuity. I need chemistry along the offensive line, and you did not have that at all in 2024, and that was part of the problem that you ran into, whether it was the run game's inability to create movement, because you got to have some chemistry in the run game, or the offensive line's inability to pass protect for either quarterback. It comes down to chemistry and continuity a lot of times. You got to have talent, no doubt, but you also have to have guys that can communicate with one another and have a good feel for how to play next to one another. I need continuity. So if you're telling me that Jacob Sexton is going to be healthy for a full season, by all means, play him at guard, start him. If you think that he's going to be better than Eddie Pierre-Louis, then sure. But I'm not sitting here doubting that Eddie Pierre-Louis can come in and steal a job. I think that dude's got every bit the ability of anybody at guard. So it's just a matter of, can he go take it? Can he go emerge and be a breakout star for Oklahoma this year? At number 5, and I think this might be a little bit low, actually, safety. You're losing Billy Bowman, but I still love the safety group led by Robert Spears-Jennings and Peyton Bowen. And then you go to a Michael Boganowski, Jaden Hardy, Reggie Powers, Omarion Robinson, Marcus Wimberly. Like, that's a really strong safety group, not just for this year, but for years to come. And you've got a diverse group, guys that are heavy hitters, guys that are good in coverage, guys that can play a lot of different roles. But Robert Spears-Jennings, to me, and I'll talk about him more in the next segment, but he's one of your better players on the team, not just on the defensive side of the ball, but on the team because of his ability to do so many different things for your defense. So safety at number 5, to me, that feels a little bit low. I like them maybe a little bit more than Colton Sully over at the Oklahoman does, but hey, it's his list. It's fair. Number 4, quarterback. And this is all going to be based on what John Mateer does. Now, John Mateer, the expectations are high for him. He's a dude that's going to have to come in and produce. You're kind of banking and putting all of the eggs in your contending basket on John Mateer. And if he is any bit of the quarterback that he was at Washington State or better, then you're going to have something. But if he regresses because the level of competition is too much, then it's going to be a rough season for Oklahoma on offense. At number 3, running back. And I get it. Again, it's a strength in numbers situation, but running back was so up and down in 2024, whether it was early in the season with Javonte Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk and Taylor Tatum, or later in the season when it was the Xavier Robinson show and Taylor Tatum and Gavin Sawchuk. It just was too much of a roller coaster. And that's not simply on the running backs. Some of that's on the offensive line, but some of it's on the running backs. Xavier Robinson, he did not have his best game against LSU. Now, they took a lot of the run game away and made Jackson Arnold try to throw to beat him. But, and in the Navy game, it wasn't necessarily the offensive line and the running game's best performance. I think there's a lot of talent there. I just don't know if they'd be my number 3 position group. I think they've got a lot to prove going into 2025. At number 2, linebacker. And this also includes those guys over at Cheetah. And I think this is probably who I'd put at number 2 too. This is a unit led by Kobe McKenzie, Kip Lewis, and Kendall Dolby, Kendall Daniels, Samuel Omasigo. And you got some guys emerging like a James Nesta who should get some opportunities, a Marcus James who should get some opportunities. It's an interesting group. And I think a guy like Kip Lewis is about to have a huge season. He's already been really, really good, but I think he'll become more of a household name this year. And that brings us to number 1. That's the defensive line. And I think there's no doubt in anybody's mind that the defensive line is the strength of this team. It was the strength of the team in 2024. And you bring back everybody that played a significant role aside from like Ethan Downs and Dejon Terry. And those guys were really, really good, but you're bringing back some of the best elements of your defensive line in R. Mason Thomas and Grayson Halton and Dominic Williams and Jayden Jackson And now you add a Marvin Jones Jr., you're getting more out of David Stone this next year. The defensive line, dude, the defensive line is good. And it's going to be the best position group, I think, again this year. And that's not to say that everybody else is going to be bad or somebody couldn't emerge and be like a 1B with them. But the defensive line is going to be stacked once again. It's going to make huge impacts on each game. And that's why the linebacker group, honestly, is so high, because those guys in front of them are making their lives so much easier. The Oklahoma Sooners were left off of the ESPN way too early All-American list for 2025. Not too terribly surprising. You lose Danny Stutzman, you lose Billy Bowman, but who could end up on that list at the end of 2025? We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. Looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert or a comedy show or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Game Time Picks for a while now, and here's why I love it. The curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. I recently grabbed a super deal for a prime seat, and I couldn't believe the value. It was a steal. The seat view features a game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what my seat will be like in the venue. It's so reassuring. And the best part, you're covered with Game Time's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee over at Game Time. And again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. Got a question for an upcoming mailbag episode? Make sure you drop mailbag in the comment. Send us a DM over on Twitter, Facebook, what have you, or hit us up in the YouTube comments. Again, tag it mailbag so it's easy to find. Look forward to discussing those questions down the road. So Oklahoma left off of ESPN's way too early All-American list. You lose Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman out the door to the NFL. That was kind of your star power on the defensive side of the ball. And your offense was so bad in 2024, nobody's going to put them as an All-American or give you any All-American love going into 2025. Again, a unit with a ton to prove. But defensively, there are some guys that I think could vie for All-American honors in 2025, but I'm going to start with the guy that a lot of this hinges on, and that's John Mateer. If John Mateer comes in and is successful for Oklahoma, I'm not saying he could be an All-American or that he will be an All-American, but I think he could be an All-American. I know I just said I'm not saying that he could be. I absolutely think he could be an All-American. And so much of that's going to ride on how well the offensive line plays, what the health of the wide receiver room looks like, the development of that group. But John Mateer showed at Washington State that he's got the ability to sling the ball. He's got the ability to run the rock. And for Oklahoma to get to contender status, they need their offense to be really, really good. They just do. It takes a totality of a team playing good football to become a playoff contender. And Oklahoma didn't have that at all in 2024. But if John Mateer is able to come in and be a fringe Heisman contender and Oklahoma gets to 10, 11 wins, I 100% believe he could be viewed as an All-American quarterback next year. Now, ESPN believes that's going to be Cade Klubnik of Clemson, who had a really strong end to the season. He was really, really good after some early season, miscues for the Tigers, but I think quarterback is kind of wide open next year. There's no definitive answer to who the best quarterback is in the country. There are expectations and assumptions being made down in Texas, but I think it's as wide open as it's been in a while. There's no Shadur Sanders. There's no Quinn Ewers. There's no Dylan Gabriel. There's no Will Howard. There's no Jalen Milroe. Carson Beck's still at Miami, but there's no Cam Ward. Who am I missing? Who am I leaving off? I'm sure I'm leaving somebody off that was a really, really good quarterback last year. no Jalen Milroe, no Jackson Dart. Garrett Nussmeier, I think, is a good maybe option to be a quarterback All-American. I'm really high on what he's going to be capable of, especially after the way he torched Oklahoma after getting obliterated by R. Mason Thomas. And that brings me to the next guy that I think could be an All-American in 2025, and that's R. Mason Thomas. 9 sacks last year, had a big breakout season, all while kind of being Oklahoma's predominant pass rusher. They didn't really have a second guy playing Robin to him. I mean, Ethan Downs had an okay season with 3 sacks, but you didn't really get much of anything else. Grayson Halton, 5 sacks. He had a breakout season in his own right. But on the other side of the defensive line, you didn't really get consistent pass rush. And hopefully, with a guy like Marvin Jones Jr. coming to town, you're getting a bookend pass rush now that's going to free R. Mason Thomas up to be in some one-on-one situations more, as opposed to having to face double and triple teams. Shout out to the end of the Missouri game where it's 3rd and 16 and R. Mason Thomas, they're rushing 3. Zach Alley calling a 3-man rush, and R. Mason Thomas is getting triple teamed. Of course, he has no chance to get to the quarterback when you're getting triple teamed. No defensive lineman, except for maybe Aaron Donald, is going to get to a quarterback when he's being triple teamed. I think R. Mason Thomas has a great shot to be an All-American this year. If he can go out and he can produce another 9, maybe a 10 sack season for the Oklahoma Sooners, I don't see any reason why he's not going to be in consideration for some All-American honors. They picked Dylan Stewart at South Carolina, who, man, he was a fantastic player for the Gamecocks. And it was Clemson's TJ Parker that also got these way too early All-American honors. He had 11 sacks last year, so a very productive dude. But again, if R. Mason Thomas is able to go and have a big season for the Sooners, then I think he could very much emerge and become one of those guys that gets those All-American selections. Another guy along the defensive line, Jayden Jackson. Pro Football Writers Association of America, ESPN, dubbed him a freshman All-American. So he's already on the radar for a lot of these guys that are going to be voting on these awards. And if he can go and he can reproduce what he did this year and maybe increase his sack total by a couple, get himself to 4 sacks instead of 2, I think he could very well be an All-American consideration next year, because he's already on everybody's radar. And you kind of have to be on people's radar a lot of times to emerge as somebody that gets that kind of recognition. And so, yeah, I'm not going to sleep on Jayden Jackson. My affinity for Jayden Jackson. How I feel about the player. If you've been listening to Locked On Sooners for some time, this is the dude that I think is transforming Oklahoma's defense because of his quickness, his strength, his ability to take on blockers, his ability to play with leverage. He's just so good. At linebacker, Kip Lewis. I mean, the dude has a nickname for when he returns interceptions for touchdowns. Kip 6. If you're getting monikers like that, people are going to take notice of what you're doing on the football field. And he had big plays in Oklahoma's win over Auburn, Oklahoma's win over Alabama, both interception returns for touchdowns. But the guy, he just flies around the football. He can play in space. He can play in coverage. He can get downhill and help in the run game. I think you're going to see a more productive Kip Lewis this year. I mean, Danny Stutzman was just vacuuming up all of the sacks like Kirby in Super Smash Bros. He was just eating up everybody. I think Kip Lewis is going to benefit from Danny Stutzman's departure, but statistically, he will benefit from Danny Stutzman's departure because somebody's got to tackle those guys that Danny Stutzman's not going to be there to get. And I know the easy answer would have been Kobe McKenzie, but I just don't think he's going to be on enough people's radars as voters to put him in an All-American discussion. I think he could be a great player. I think he could be a big-time performer for the Sooners, but if I'm having to pick a linebacker, it's going to be Kip Lewis because he's had the big plays. And a lot of times it's those big highlight plays that make people take notice of what you're doing on the football field. Lastly, Robert Spears-Jennings. That's my dude, man, out of the Tulsa area. He's a guy that I think has the ability to do everything you want a safety to do on the football field. He can play in coverage. He can blitz off the edge. He can play downhill in the run game. He can play in the box. You can line him up in single high sets, and he's just a dynamic player for you. He hits hard, and he's somebody that can just separate the receiver from the football. And he does a really good job at making sure he's doing it in a way that's legal and not going to get him penalized. So I'm real high on Robert Spears-Jennings going into this year. I thought he was fantastic in 2024, his first full season as a starter. And I think the sky is the limit for him. I think he's got a chance to make a name for himself this next year, even though, ESPN's looking at like guys like Caleb Downs, and Rod Moore of Ohio State and Michigan, and Michael Taffy of Texas. I think Robert Spears-Jennings has a chance to make as much noise as any safety in America. And again, if Oklahoma's offense is better, if Oklahoma can improve their record to say 9 or 10 wins, then a lot of these guys that I'm talking about are going to be on everybody's radar because Oklahoma is going to be in the playoff picture, and people are going to be talking about what Oklahoma's defense is doing, what John Mateer is doing. And so I think these are a group of guys that have a chance to find themselves on some All-American award lists at the end of 2025. CBS Sports' Will Backus had some thoughts on Brent Venables taking over the defense. We'll see what he had to say and discuss that coming up next year on Locked On Sooners. Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Hope you got your coffee. Hope you're having a great Tuesday morning. And so CBS Sports had thoughts. Will Backus had thoughts on Brent Venables taking over the play calling duties. So let's just get into that and see what he had to say, and then we'll respond. He says, naturally, given his inexperience and Oklahoma's lackluster results thus far, there are questions about his ability to actually direct a football team. Coaches have plenty of responsibilities that transcend the actual game day operation. And adding direct defensive preparation and play calling to his plate may take Venables' attention away from some of these crucial details. Now, he goes on to talk about the hire of Nate Dreiling. My apologies to Mr. Dreiling, Coach Dreiling, for mispronouncing his name, and adding Wes Goodwin, former defensive coordinators, having co-defensive coordinators in Todd Bates, Jay Valai, and then a former defensive coordinator in Brandon Hall. Perhaps that takes some of the weekly game prep away from Brent Venables' plate. At the same time, he's going to be more actively involved in the defense. And so I totally get why people are a little bit concerned about Brent Venables managing the game and managing the program while directly overseeing the defense. At the same time, desperate times call for desperate measures, right? And I'm not sitting here saying that Brent Venables is desperate because Zach Alley left and they didn't hire Jim Knowles. I'm sitting here saying that maybe he's feeling that this is the only way to go forward because my job's on the line. And again, you talk about it. If your job is on the line, how comfortable are you going to feel delegating responsibilities, especially responsibilities from an area of your own expertise? That's kind of where this comes back to. And so, I mean, there's going to be a lot of focus on Brent Venables and his ability to manage football games and manage the team while overseeing the defensive responsibilities that come with being the play caller. But the beauty of what he's done this offseason in hiring Dreiling, and in particular Wes Goodwin, is that you hire Wes Goodwin as your assistant linebackers coach and your defensive coordinator, a dude that's got a lot of familiarity with Brent Venables and a lot of success with Brent Venables back at Clemson. I think this is Zach Alley, but a more successful version of Zach Alley, a higher level of successful version of Zach Alley. Zach Alley was really good, but he had never been at the Power 4 level, where Wes Goodwin has experience as a coordinator for several years, I think pretty successfully. And now you have him. Now, did he have some stinkers? Absolutely had some stinker games, no doubt. But I think it's a dude that's still a young defensive coordinator. And so the story is not completely written on him. But Brent Venables is going to have to rely on some of those guys to do some of the prep work and do some of the game planning, because he's going to have to make sure that everything else is running smoothly, because he's also going to be responsible for recruit visits and making sure that the coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball is creating a game plan that's going to fit what the team's goals are and the team's game plan is. So there's a little bit of that. And I totally get people's apprehension about not having a CEO style head coach. At the same time, You've got Brent Venables. He's really good at calling the defense. Let him call the defense. It'd be like having Lincoln Riley and not letting him call the offense, or having Steve Sarkisian and not letting him call the offense. If Nick Saban was your head coach and he decided, you know what, I'm going to call the defense, are you going to argue with Nick Saban? No. And you're going to mistake what I'm saying here for Brent Venables as Nick Saban. They're not the same play. They're not the same person. But Nick Saban was a very successful coordinator, right? And if he wants to coordinate, let him coordinate. Bill Belichick, same thing. Very successful coordinators. If they came and said, I'm going to be the defensive play caller, nobody would bat an eye at it. But because Brent Venables hasn't really had a lot of team success at Oklahoma, I think it creates questions. And again, reasonable questions. The proof is going to be in the pudding. We're going to have to see him prove it on the football field that he can be a defensive play caller and still manage the football game and manage the team in a way that is going to help lead them to success. Backus goes on to say, in essence, Venables' decision to become Oklahoma's de facto defensive coordinator seems like an effort to take a more direct approach in turning the Sooners' fortunes around. While Oklahoma's defense should reap the immediate reward, it will take some more growth from Venables as a CEO head coach and tremendous effort from Oklahoma's other units to really get things on the right track. Totally agree with what Will's saying there. If you get the offensive line going, you get the quarterback and the wide receiver passing game going, it's going to make the defense look a lot better, because you're going to have an offense that's holding up its end of the bargain and taking some of the pressure off of this defense. And if you do that, the defense maybe isn't getting put in some bad positions where they're having to play from their side of the 50 or have to play, from behind. When you're a defense and you're sitting there forced to play 10 points down because your offense can't do anything, or you're forced to play on your side of the 50 because your offense keeps turning the ball over or can't convert a 4th and 1, that stress and that strain, it eventually will break you. Especially like when you're playing kind of a bend don't break style of defense, where maybe you're willing to give up a couple first downs, but you're going to make sure once they cross the 50 that you're stopping them. Well, if they're already on that side of the 50, it's a lot harder to stop them. And that momentum matters. I know momentum isn't something that can be objectively quantified in sports, but when your offense isn't doing anything, eventually what your defense is doing is going to wear thin. And so while so much of the focus on Brent Venables is going to be on his ability to call the defense and be the CEO, really what has to happen this year is your offense has to make such a jump that we're not relying on the defense every single week to shut them down and hold them to 10. Now, if they go do that, obviously that's going to give Oklahoma a great chance to win. But if you can't rely on your offense to get you to 30 points here and there, then that doesn't even have to be every week. But if they can't get to 30 points on a regular basis, it's going to be really, really hard to win anything at any level. And so while so much of the focus, again, is going to be on Brent Venables and what his defense does, I think the defense is still going to be really, really good, because there's a lot of really good players on that side of the ball. We just talked about them in the second segment, from R. Mason Thomas to Jayden Jackson, Dominic Williams, Grayson Halton, Kip Lewis, Kobe McKenzie, Kendall Dolby, Kendall Daniels, Robert Spears-Jennings, Peyton Bowen. I mean, there's a lot of really good players on that side of the ball. Marvin Jones Jr. And so if that defense can just be what it was last year with some improved cornerback play, where they're not giving up big plays, and then the offense starts to cook a little bit, I mean, you're going to have a chance to make some noise, man. And again, I'll say it. I'll keep saying it until you're tired of me saying it. I need to see them prove it. Go beat Michigan, score 30 points on Michigan, and get a win. And I'll feel much more confident and much more comfortable about the direction of this team in 2025 than I would be if, say, you won 20-17 or you lost even in that Michigan game and your offense isn't able to score 20. But I've got some optimism for it, but still I need to see the proof. I had a lot of optimism about this team last year and it went for naught. Again, a lot of it because of injuries, but again, the offensive coordinator situation didn't help you. Your quarterback didn't help you. So I need to see a quarterback that helps you win games and an offensive line situation that helps you win games and not make everything about what the defense is doing. The offense has to return to Oklahoma standards. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. The show is at Locked On Sooners on all your favorite social media platforms. So go check that out. Jay, again, he'll be back next week when I'll be out of town, having some much needed time with my wife as we try to get away a little bit. Yeah, so Jay, I'm sure will have all his own takes on everything that we've talked about this week, and he'll have some thoughts and hopefully some really good guests as well. But until next time, I'm John Williams. Boomer Sooner. Boomer Sooner, Boomer Sooner, Boomer Sooner, Boomer Sooner.